Okay, it takes me a minute. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's my big pleasure to introduce a colleague from Sweden to you at the moment. I will go a little bit into details in a second. Just let me mention at the beginning that we have Professor Gustaf Sjöberg with us from the Department of Law from Stockholm University. And the purpose of this conversation is once again to get a closer understanding and a proper and more realistic understanding about how other departments of law and faculties of law and law schools are dealing with the COVID-19 situation. And Stockholm is, for many reasons, an excellent example. First, because it's located in Sweden, and Sweden is a constant topic when it comes to the discussion of COVID-related matters all over in Europe, including Austria. Second, Stockholm is a very prominent law school of a rather large size, roughly speaking, half of the university or the law school of Vienna. So about, as I just learned, 700 law students that are enrolled freshly every year. And Stockholm is a university which has a long tradition and a very good reputation when it comes to IT and IT-related matters of law. One of the oldest departments of legal informatics was founded at Stockholm University. Professor Sjöberg is head of department there. And as I just learned in preparation for today's conversation, the faculty is not split into different departments then, into private law, public law, or criminal law, etc. But there is just one department of law at the University of Stockholm, and it's led by Professor Sjöberg, who is the head of this. He was so kind to come to us today. I just remind those of you who are constantly watching this series that we already had a prior edition of Ars Boni quite at the beginning of the pandemic on the situation in Oslo, then with my direct colleague, Cecilia Magnussen Sjöberg, who is a professor with a specific focus on data protection and IT law. Professor Sjöberg, thank you so much for being with us today. As I just see, you are probably sitting not in your office, but at home.
Right,
so
yes.
I would assume that this is also your daily routine at the moment, that you do most of your work at home, don't you?
No, I'm actually at my office 3 days a week, which is interesting in a way because it's quite efficient to work at home in most capacities, I think. But as head of department, there are people needing to pop in and they want to change some words with me. There's a big step to call or send an email or something like that. So they want to just come by and do things. And so during all the pandemic, I have been at the office 3 days a week and 2 days at home.
And when it comes to being in the office, are there specific rules that apply? How to meet people, how many people, wearing masks, being vaccinated and all this?
We ask people not to be there if they don't have to. So there are very few there, but it's been different during the time, but we have asked people to refrain from being there as much as possible. It has been totally locked for periods, but we have as in Sweden in general, we have a sort of a common sense based attitude, and if someone has to come in and do something, they are allowed to, and if they want to meet in a group, the civil law people, for example, they can do so, and so on. But when it comes to masks, the advices of the government, they have been against masks or a compulsory mask thing. So masks have not been big in Sweden at all. They have asked people to wear masks in when they are commuting and things like that. But it's rather unusual with masks, and people don't have masks on on them at the office.
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment, we advise people not to come in if they don't have to. It's a bit strange that I'm there, but I, as head of department, I think I can do exemptions from the rules. But at the moment, there are we are advising against coming there, and there are perhaps 5 or 10 people there or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to vaccinations, I think Sweden is quite similar to the situation in Austria. So you have quite a lot of people vaccinated, but clearly not everyone, and in particular not with a third shot, right?
We are getting there. I can't. I don't know the numbers, but there are quite a few that has the third shot, and we are something like 70% have 2 shots. And there's also, I suppose that's the same more or less or everywhere, that's voluntary, and it's we have started to use a vaccine passport, but it's not in regular use. But we have a good vaccination situation, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So in Austria, just to let you know, there is now an obligation to get vaccinated introduced by law. It passed the parliament last week, and we are going to have a legal obligation to get vaccinated starting in February for people who are 18 or older. Is there a similar debate ongoing in Sweden at the moment?
No, I would say there's no, and the interesting thing is that it's. I wouldn't say it's going in the other direction, but there has been very good. People have relied on the government and the authorities when it comes to what measures to take, and they have been very informal and voluntary. But now, when it comes to the Omicron, there are so many people that has to stay home. So hospitals, for instance, there's not so many very ill patients in intensive care, but the number of employees, the doctors and nurses that are not allowed to come are so big, so it's difficult to run a hospital. So the people start to wonder if is it really reasonable to be so careful when everyone more or less is infected by the Omicron, and that debate sort of leads away from a compulsory goes in the other direction from a compulsory vaccination. Mm-hmm. So I think and there's a strong there not as strong, but I think. Yeah, yesterday there were big demonstrations against the measures, vaccination passports and things like that. But there is no debate. But it's not a strong debate to have a compulsory vaccination.
But isn't it funny?
May I ask you what happens if you don't vaccinate yourself?
You get fined. You get fined. There is no obligation, so they will not enforce this in the sense of that they will bring you into the hospital and give you the shot, but you will be quite significantly fined, several thousand euro a year of fine if you don't get your vaccine.
There is a provision in our constitution that says we are protected against. Having the state doing things with your body. I can't. So that's a constitutional problem in Sweden to have that.
Yeah, I mean the constitutional issue is quite similar probably everywhere, and the majority of the German-speaking scholars in constitutional law, I would say, are of the opinion that is possible under the existing fundamental rights regime. And I may ask you, when it comes to Swedish constitutional law, is there, I mean, the issue is not completely new. When you are intoxicated and have a traffic accident, for example, I would assume that it is it legal under Swedish law then to analyze a blood probe of a driver who was involved in a traffic accident and might be intoxicated? Is this legal?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, so it doesn't happen that often.
I've never heard about it. I've never.
Okay.
They always volunteer, I think.
Okay.
I have. It's embarrassing, but I don't actually know.
Okay. And when it comes to specific psychiatric disorders, I would assume that it might be legal to use physical force to control people.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Certainly, no problem. Okay. And I think that you can inject things into them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but
they can. There's no problem. But that's more specific, and it's a very hard regime. There has to be a direct danger to themselves or to someone else,
which is different, obviously here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so but coming back to the manifestations that happened yesterday that you were mentioning, isn't it strange then that people go on the street protesting against measures when there are more or less no measures? What is the protest about then?
It's a bit strange. But there are measures when it comes to. We can divide it when it comes to individuals. It's more, as I said, informal, voluntary, it's recommendations, you should be careful and so on. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to businesses, and then there's binding rules on the number of persons and vaccine passports when it comes to theaters and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I it's a bit strange, but they and it's I think also it's complicated because some of the people demonstrating or participate in the manifestations are, I'm not sure that the pandemic is the real reason. They want to sort of protest and create unrest generally in the society. Mm-hmm. But there were thousands of people protesting, but anyway, it's relatively few when you see to the whole population of the country. But it's a bit strange. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, but when it comes back to the measures, is there any test regime that is compulsory or at least voluntarily available so that people get PCR tested before entering an office or something?
There is no voluntary, regime when it comes to going into offices and things like that. But there is a rule that the general disease law says that if you have symptoms, you have to do a test. And I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to know if someone has symptoms and if they don't take a test. But according to that law, you are supposed to take a test, a PCR test, and that's generally available. For example, in here where I live, you can you do it via the web and order it, and you get a time, and then you get there, you drive by with your car, pick up the test, go away for a while and do the test, and then you leave it, and you have your answer in a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very efficient in that way. Mm-hmm. But that's voluntarily.
Yeah. Okay, so just to give you something to compare with, here in Vienna, where I am, it's absolute standard procedure that people can get their test from the local supermarket. It's free of charge, and people are very, very clearly, I would say, not. I mean, people, you get the message that you should do this on a regular basis, even if you are not having any symptoms, just as a precautionary measure. So people test a lot here, even without symptoms, just in case. Before
I don't think that's common here.
Yeah,
and you have to go to, if you want a doctor's certificate or whatever you call it for on the, that you are well, not infected, then you have to go to a doctor. Then you can't do this on the parking lot on the hospital. But there's a lot of testing. We had a lot of criticism in the beginning that the capacity for testing was too bad in the beginning.
So, but just to summarize this, if I understand it correctly, Professor Sjöberg, so there is no social rule that or even legal rule that people should wear masks indoors. There is no social or legal rule that people should test without symptoms. And there is no clear rule that you are not allowed to go to the office if you think that you should be there for whatever reason. So people can go there and meet there.
If I think the key word is if you shouldn't go there if it's not necessary.
Yeah. But the question whether it's necessary or not is something which the individual decides, and not a public body or something.
And there is very much in line with the general approach from the authorities in Sweden. It's personal responsibility and recommendations and things like that. And when it comes to masks, it's interesting that they didn't even want to. In the beginning, the front figure from the authorities, he was against masks. He thought them dangerous because in ideal conditions they are good, but when you are taking it off and on and so on, and you are having your fingers in, he thought them more or less harmful. So he didn't want to say it's good with masks. So, and that set sort of the standard in Sweden for a long time, which I think what was picked up by people in America and Trump and so on, the country of the free and brave, so to speak, that they don't have to have masks. But that's very, very true. But there is recommendations that when you go on a train or in the subway and so on, you should wear a mask now.
Yeah, and
all the recommendations.
And how many people do this? How many people follow this? How, roughly, is it 1/2 or 1/3 or less than 1/3?
1/5 or something like less.
Okay. And I mean, there are plenty of questions here in this. I mean, this is one of the reasons why Sweden is so an interesting example. The first one is that the corona policy was so expert driven from the very beginning in Sweden, and that there were quite a few people telling the political system how the political system should deal with the pandemic. Is this still the case, or is this principle a little bit more under pressure now that it is also a political issue, whether people should wear masks or not, and not only a public health related one?
I'll come back. I just wanted to say, I find it fascinating because in the beginning, there were the experts, and there was one senior expert. It's apparently he's a very well-known person in pandemic circles around the world. He's been around for 40 years or something like that, and he has employed all the senior staff at the government agency. But he said, boys, you can do whatever you want, but you have to have to let the schools be open. That's important. And I find it fascinating that's sort of a one man's belief in that. It's not based on perhaps it's based on research, but that had such an impact on the policy of Sweden. And as I understand, we have a lot of credit for letting the schools for children open during the pandemic.
And the person is Tegnell, no? Anders Tegnell we are talking about.
No, it's the even more senior person. It's Johan Giesecke. He employed Tegnell.
Okay, I see. Okay.
And he is a UN and EU expert at the moment, but he was the predecessor of Tegnell.
I see. Okay. Okay.
But when coming back to your question, it's shifting away. You have changed the director general for that agency, and the political. It was almost extreme in the beginning, but Tegnell was the only one appearing on TV, and it appeared he decided everything, and the director general was not appearing in TV and so on, and the prime minister wasn't visible at all. Now we have a new prime minister, a new director general, and so on. So there is a shift to more political interference, or whatever you call it, and that could be, I don't know, but maybe they find it more safe to act, to be active and seen as strong in this moment. I don't think they really understood the power of Omicron. So they, but it was. I think it was a combination in early days of it was a very uncertain situation. It was wise to listen to the expert, and it was politically safe to be able to blame the expert if it went wrong. But that has shifted quite a lot, I would say.
But the principles still remain the same, in the sense of that a lot is based on individual decision and individual risk management, I would say. And
when it comes to individuals, yes. When it comes to businesses and theaters and gatherings and so on, then it's more on hard rules. So it's a limitation on the number of persons, and it's a requirement of vaccine passports and so on. But when it comes to individuals,
the tricky part then obviously is the interplay between the two areas, right? So I mean, if it's the individual deciding, I mean, if you are the supervisor of a team of 4 people and you think that there is a need to meet in the office, then it's an individual decision in a way, but it puts some pressure on the 4 others who then need to go to the to the office.
Yes,
and when
certainly.
they are entering the tram, and 1/5 of the people in the tram wears masks, it's again an individual decision to wear or not to wear a mask, which has an impact on all the others, obviously, right? So finding the intersection between the two areas then is probably a tricky day-to-day exercise, I would assume.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think one of the things that annoys especially lawyers but people in general as well is that it seems more or less the same situations are treated very differently depending on what kind of recommendation or rules you're under. But I don't think the trick for us lawyers to see is not the same situation doesn't necessarily have to be treated in the same way, because the important thing is that you keep contamination down. It doesn't. The goal is not equal situations treated equal, but to get people out of the way of contamination. I think that annoys people and lawyers especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's come to the collective part of the question and to the law school in particular. So I mean, this is now the second part, right? So this is something where people meet and where quite a lot of people meet. What is the day-to-day practice when it comes to teaching at the moment?
At the moment, we have we can have Stockholm University as a whole first. That's the main rule is physical teaching, campus-based. So people are supposed to come to campus and have examinations and everything. The law school, the law department has deviated from that. We say we are so big, we don't want to have 300 persons in one place. So we have a quite an elaborate scheme. We don't have big lectures. They are all recorded or web-based. We don't have big exams with 300 persons in one place. When it comes to seminars, the students are allowed to choose between physical attendance and web-based. So we have different groups so they can choose, and it's something. It's a bit more web-based than physical attendance, but around the same amount of students in both categories.
Okay, and do you segregate? This is also a question coming from one of our listeners. Do you segregate people based on the fact whether they are vaccinated or not? Is there any distinction made?
No.
Okay, so everyone who chooses to do so, no matter whether she is vaccinated or not, and no matter whether she is tested or not, and no matter whether she wears a mask or not, is in principle allowed to attend a physical a seminar in presence on site.
Yes. The only exception is when they have symptoms. They are not allowed in.
Yeah, but everyone knows that you are infectious with Omicron quite some time before you get the first symptoms.
Yep. And
still this is not really challenged. So nobody, okay.
But many students and the most voicerous students, they don't want to come to university. But from the law department's point, the policy from Stockholm University is that everyone should be in physical attendance. So we have sort of deviated from that and allow people to choose a web-based group if they want to.
But how can you argue this? I mean, from a public law point of view, but is there no obligation to protect students from being infected? And if you tell them that they should come, I mean, as you said, the general policy of University of Stockholm is everyone should come in principle.
Yep.
And at the same time, everyone knows that test only after symptom is too late. Still, I mean, there is no claim or challenge that this might infringe the obligation of a university to protect its students.
I'm not aware of such a debate when it comes to the university in general. There has been, I would say, uprising is a bit much, but in Uppsala University, they just had a big exam with 300 persons in one location, and they had a student protest that they were forced to attend, and they had a sort of a protest without 800 names or something like that. But since our students are allowed to choose themselves, there are people wanting to come, and as I understand, our students are mostly very content with our solution. If there is any objections, that it's when they are forced to come.
And there is no argument that at least those who are not vaccinated should stay at home?
No, we ask everyone to be vaccinated, but there is we don't think we can. We think we can't have a guards or whatever you call it to look at the vaccine pass to attend seminars and things like that.
And that's a social rule, or is this or are there legal arguments why you can't do that? I mean, if your department had the idea that you start evaluating whether a student is vaccinated or not, would that be legally possible and just socially awkward? or would it also
It would
be
it
legally?
would be, I don't think it would be socially awkward, but we have thought that it is when it's when they are attending a program, a law program, and there are compulsory parts of that, to ask them to have a vaccine passport or something like that is questionable from a constitutional aspect. And then we have the administrative part of it. So you have someone at the door asking them to show a passport and say you're not allowed in, and you can come in and you are not, and it would be very cumbersome to have that as well. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of several parts of it.
But isn't the argument also true the other way around? So if people are expected to be on site, this comes with risk, in particular if there are unvaccinated, untested people without masks in the same room. And one might argue that this is also coming with some constitutional rights problems then, because it might be that a person doesn't feel safe enough to come to the university and might decide not to take the exam.
Yeah, but they have the option to the exams are web-based, so they don't have to come.
Okay, and in Uppsala they had, right? You said that in Uppsala they were.
In Uppsala, yes. Yes, in Uppsala they had. Yes. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and nobody said that might be a problem from a constitutional point of view?
I haven't heard that, no.
Okay, that's interesting. Because that's obviously quite a standard argument here, right? That the university is also obliged to protect students who have a specific risk to be infected, and therefore there needs to be protective measures in place, including a proper check of whether someone is vaccinated or not on site, right?
I agree. I haven't heard the constitutional argument here in Sweden regarding that, but I think it's more or less common sense that you're not during these times force people, more or less force. But it's I think you can say they are more or less forced to come because they don't have, they can be, if they have a student room, they may not be allowed to stay on if they don't do the exam. They don't get their, I don't know what you call it, the allowance for as a student and so on. So they are more or less forced to go there, whether they have symptoms or not. And I think it's more or less it's for me it's more common sense and not to do it. But I have not heard a constitutional argument. No, okay. The one that it's actually, I think, the first time I've heard the line of reasoning that there's an obligation to protect from the university. I haven't heard that before.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. And when it comes now to the online exam,
but sorry, when it comes to the constitutional argument, we believe there's a sort of a sort of just reasonably and common sense that we have such a that's why we have the option that the ones that doesn't want to come don't have to. Yeah. But the constitutional line of reasoning, that's the first time I heard. Yeah.
Okay. And when it comes now to the exams that are offered online, this is an equivalence. So students are free to choose either on site or online.
No, and there is exams are online.
All of them in Stockholm. All of them are online. At the moment.
Yeah. At the law school,
but not in other schools.
No. So the only thing when they're allowed to choose, that's seminars.
Okay.
So big lectures with 300 persons, we don't have that. They're all web-based.
Okay.
Pre-recorded or so the only so it's 3 parts. Big lectures, web-based or pre-recorded. exams web-based, and seminars when there is an exchange between student and teacher, then they can choose from attendance or web-based.
I see. And the exams which are online, there is no issue here that professors argue that an exam requires physical presence in order to be properly organized.
There are some professors believing that, yes.
Okay, but
you can organize it. You can do the questions in a way so it's more reasoning and there are also so that you can use all the literature from the course and so on, and so it's more like essay questions and not as much. And we had quite a few. I'm not so very good at the technical things, but if someone is using if several students are using the same IP address, then we'll pick them out and see if they have collaborated and if they have the same answers and so on. So we have quite a lot of cheating suspicion.
But isn't that, I mean, this sounds very interesting to me because we have much harder rules here in Vienna at the moment, when it comes to university. And there is a constant debate since the very beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, whether at all it can be argued that exams can be at all organized off-site, so online, because of legal reasons, because of the many cheating possibilities that come, and also because it's so different from the style of examination when you know that students are sitting at home and that they have access to literature and so on. So I would say that roughly, 90% of my colleagues would argue very strongly that it's better today than tomorrow to return to the traditional in-class style of examination for law students. And I find it interesting then that, if I understand you correctly, this part sounds rather liberal in Sweden, in the sense of that you are allowing students to stay off-site for the most important part of their studies, whereas you allow them to be on-site during seminars, right? So that's interesting to see that from outside. I would put it like this. I mean, they can voluntarily be on site when it comes to seminars. Seminars is the most efficient way to learn, and you need the interaction with the teacher and so on. And we think we can arrange the exams. It's just for the first period of this term or this semester. So the latter part we haven't decided on yet, and we want them to come back, but we don't think it's possible to gather 350 persons in one room and have an exam at the moment. And how are you?
We don't have. There is an increased number of cheating matters, but not dramatically. And the results hasn't gone up much.
And how are you deciding on these matters? Is it you as the head of department who decides whether? No,
it's a separate body under the headmaster of the university. So we investigate in the department, and then we bring it to this body, and there's I think it's the headmaster of the university and a retired judge and people deciding this if it's a cheating or not.
Yeah, that's about the cheating. Yeah, but it's about the general policy. So whether or not
the policy for the departments is decided by me. Yes.
Yes. And would you say that this is something where you have to monitor and find some balance between very opposing points of views among the professors and the students, or would you describe it more as a consensus-based approach?
I would describe it as a consensus-based. There are, I think everyone wants, the ideal is to have, sorry, I've changed my mind a bit, because there are courses that under normal circumstances have what they call home exams. So you're allowed to write an essay, so they are web-based under normal circumstances, and they find it working very well. But the normal type of exam is of course better to do on site. But and there are strong advocates for that, a few, but they don't protest much. They understand the and it's very difficult to do it against the students who, to force them to come. There you have the perhaps the opposite of or it's the same. Our obligation to protect them and force them to come is sort of it's a difficult problem to force them to be on site. Yes.
And do you have?
I think everyone.
Sorry.
I think everyone accept that. And I had an interesting incident. One of the professors very strongly advocating physical presence. I was with him in the room when there's one of the staff, one of the administrators. She was so she started crying because the students were on her so much because they didn't want to come and they wanted web-based, and he was quite taken by the reaction of that staff person and so perhaps perhaps I shouldn't advocate so much physical presence.
Which brings me to the question, a quite obvious question: how are you dealing then with people who have personal fears or personal reasons not to follow the general policy? For example, teaching staff that doesn't see herself in the position to teach a seminar on site. They are free to decide. They can freely offer it then remotely.
We have said that people they're in a risk group or have close relatives that are in a risk group doesn't have to be on site, and we have, it's not been we have never questioned if they say I'm in a risk group, I don't want to do this, then it's okay. We don't have they don't need a certificate or something on that. We rely on them, and there are just a few of them that's.
Yeah, so that's a clear minority, right? So most people agree on being. Yeah. But this sounds to me very much, and also one of our listeners is putting it like this. This sounds to me very much like a very consensus-based approach, which is at the same time okay with accepting that everyone will be affected sometime, sooner or later, right?
Yeah,
and this is.
Yeah, and it's the situation at the moment is that we had a teachers meeting last week in a group in one class, and I think there were 8 teachers, and one of them is a lawyer. So she had, before a court case, she had to have a PCR test. She had no symptoms whatsoever, and she tested positive in the afternoon, and all 8 were hindered from having physical teaching during a week, but the spread of the infection is now such. If you follow the recommendations to stay home and so on, it's very difficult to say that there's a sort of a tipping point that people also question, is it really reasonable that you stay home for a week if you have met someone that's tested positive and you have no symptoms and so on?
Yeah.
It's starting to be questioned whether it's reasonable to have these recommendations.
Which goes even more into the direction that there seems to be some kind of general agreement on everyone is going to get it sometime.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's interesting, because at the same time, I would assume that also in Sweden, there is quite some debate about the long-term implications of being infected and about the public health implications of too many people being infected at the same time, and the costs of all this. So it's very, very different from what we see in many, at least in the countries that I follow the political debate, mainly German-speaking countries, obviously, or mainly Germany and Austria, let's put it like this, right? So there's quite some consensus, I would assume, still here, that everyone will get it is not the policy driving factor, right? Let's put it like this. That's
no, but I think there are sort of everyone more or less will get it. It's not that serious for most people at the Omicron anyway. When at this level of, I can't remember if I told. I talked to a doctor last week, and there was no problem with serious illness at her hospital, but there was a shortage of doctors and nurses because they, according to the recommendations, they should stay at home if they've met someone with positive tests and so on. So there were almost no one there, and the patients suffers from that as well. So it's, I don't say it's quickly changing, but it's sort of, there are several elements. People are getting tired of following all these recommendations and have problem understanding them. And it's sort of when everyone gets infected or knows someone that's infected, the drive to uphold it is less strong.
And how prominent is this change in the day-to-day political debate? Is this just something like any other issue, or is this really on the top of everyone's plate every day? Because
no, it's not on the top. It's I think it's slowly going that direction. Sort of, it's at a point there is if, for example, in a hospital, if most nurses and doctors are at home because they have met someone that's tested positive and they feel quite okay, and the patients suffers at the hospital where there's no doctors, then sort of people start to question, is this really reasonable to be a home for this? So it's slow development, I would say.
So again, my understanding is that a lot of the things that you're telling me are very much going into a consensus-based social credibility approach, which brings me to another question, which is there any, I mean, strictly speaking, legal debate on the policy? So people complaining in front of a court, people asking for compensation because they could or could not go to work, and so on. Students who sue the university because they are of the opinion that this is not right, and anything of this, or is this all covered by this? How should I call it? This consensus, right? Let's put it like this: consensus, or let's keep things like they are and do not touch them too strongly approach.
I asked one of the constitutional professors about this yesterday, and she said that's one of the most interesting things. We have no court cases on this, on challenging challenging the restrictions or measures or anything. And it's very difficult to challenge a recommendation, but there are hard rules as well. But it's not challenged in court.
Okay.
She didn't know of any court cases in this, actually.
And is Sweden reflecting why Sweden is so different from other legislations in Europe, or is this just not important either?
I don't know why. I don't know why. It's not a tradition in Sweden to challenge things according to the constitution. Not in this way anyway. I suppose it has to do with our recent history. With it's a lot of consensus based, and we don't have the rights-based system where it's quite new and so on. I worked as a junior judge 30 years ago, and when you sort of raised a rights-based argument, the old judges said, "Well, what is this? Oh, now it's commonplace when you have the human rights and so on." But it's I don't say it's new, but it's not an old tradition. And anyway, there is no court cases actually on this.
It must be difficult to teach this then.
Yes, it is.
Because obviously, I mean, when you talk about COVID and law in German-speaking countries, you have quite a lot of court decisions now, and they are obviously part of the doctrine on the issue. And for example, the German Constitutional Court has issued several opinions which are of utmost importance to the question in how far fundamental rights are affected or not affected by the legal measures. And
we don't have any. No.
Yeah.
And the professor asked, she's well familiar with Israel and I think Germany and South Africa, and she said every inch is questioned and challenged there.
Yeah, indeed.
It's very different.
Yeah,
very
indeed.
Different.
And when it comes then to foreign students to Sweden, do they simply integrate into the system as well? So you don't hear them either? Erasmus students, for example.
I haven't noticed a difference between foreigners and Swedes. No, no, I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps I think foreign students are more eager to be on site because they are in a foreign country, and they don't want to sit alone in the room without meeting anyone. I mean, the Swedish students normally have their families around them, but if you travel from far away to Sweden, you don't want to sit in your room and have a web-based. So if there is a difference, they want to be on site more than the Swedish students.
I see. And the Swedish students are, I mean, when it comes to the teaching style, did the professors, did you offer any kind of courses or qualification or additional material whatsoever for the professors who suddenly ended up in a situation where they needed to teach remotely, or did everyone learn this as well independently? How to use, I mean, I saw on your website that you have plenty of recommendations for the staff and material to study, but this is for everyone independently, right? So there is no organizational approach to this, or is there any?
There's a mixture. Again, there's a mixture.
Okay.
But in the beginning, there was no time for this. I mean, when we changed to web-based, it was done in a couple of weeks. But now we have evaluations with recommendations. There are courses to take and things like that, but it's not mandatory. It's voluntary for the teachers. And we have seen it very much as not permanent, but the demands from let's say that in the beginning, the first term and so on, the first time, the students were very understanding and were glad that we could do it. But the students are the demands from the students are much higher now when it's gone for almost 2 years or more than almost 2 years. So that's not an answer to your question, but we offer courses, and we are trying to get more organized, but we all the time we think this is just temporary and will go away soon.
Okay. Well, but it's now already 2 years that it's not going away. So let's see.
No, but we thought so. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. There's one question from the audience, and perhaps we close the session then with this question, because it's a very fundamental one and a very important one. So one of our listeners says that he or she has the hypothesis that Sweden or the Swedish people seem to be more trustful when it comes to society matters, and whether the government is able to handle and deal with the pandemic properly, and that might be, so that trust is the key explanation for this voluntary / consensus-based approach. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I don't know, Anders Tegnell is known worldwide, I think, but
he is,
but
absolutely.
To have an expert standing there explaining, and he was very open, very candid, and he at least he appeared to say nothing he didn't could back with scientific results and so on. I think that created trust. And I think it would have been worse if there were politicians standing there and trying to persuade people doing things and so on. He there's inherent in the Swedish society a big portion of trust towards society, and the way that was handled now by an expert standing in. He had press conference every day for a long time. And I think that sort of created and gave more confidence to the way it was handled. But I think the short answer to the question is yes.
And this hasn't changed yet significantly, although it's already 2 years now. Because if I may,
it slowly changes, I think. There are a number of reasons for that. People are tired. People think they know more and are in a position to question more. There's a bigger political. In the beginning, there was total political consensus. No party argued that we should do something else. Now there's starting to be a political debate about it, and sort of the sense of urgency and crisis is sort of which feeds a consensus or trust in the authorities is slowly fading away, and it's becoming it's not so much a crisis situation as a normal political issue that there's a political debate and you can have different views on it and so on. He created the feeling that it was not debatable. It was scientific facts. We have to do this, and that created, and all the politicians stood behind that, and it was that combined with a trust in the authorities.
Yeah, but also, I mean, also Tegnell's position when it comes to the scientific debate, I would assume that there are scientists who are not completely of his opinion in quite many points.
Yep.
And I would expect this debate also to be more visible now than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. But still, that did not change too much in the public perception of that he or his authority are the driving factors in how to deal with the pandemic, correct?
I'm not sure that the other experts are more prominent now. There were attacks. There were attacks. I don't know, a year ago or something like that. But that was sort of downplayed, and they made mistakes. They had wrong numbers in their articles and so on. So they sort of they didn't get traction really. And I don't think that's the main shift. The main shift is that it's becoming more political and more less consensus based now. I don't think the scientific debate is not that great. No.
Okay, that's also interesting, because that's also quite different. I think, at least in the countries that I see quite closely, there's plenty of also scientific debate about how the new figures and the new measures and the vaccines and whatsoever need to be assessed from a scientific point of view, right? This is clearly far from one opinion on what the right measure would be. It's 25 different opinions, I would say, and 22 governance support bodies, each of them having an opinion, right? So
okay, now there perhaps is such a development as well, but it's not the prominent one. The prominent one is I think it's shifting to an ordinary political question, and an ordinary political debate with different. It's very, when all the parties agree with an expert authority, then it's quite, and the sense of urgency, and in combination with basic trust on authorities, then it's very strong in a society.
Yeah. Professor Sjöberg, thank you so much for this eye-opening hour. This is really, one of the audience said, let's call Sweden another planet from now on. I wouldn't put it like another planet, but certainly a very different approach from what we are seeing here in Austria and in Germany. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening, good afternoon to all of you. Stay healthy, stay connected, and all the best. See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.